After 8 years of divorce, his ex-wife mocked him at their reunion without knowing who he really was. The moment Daniel walked into the grand reunion hall, after 8 years of divorce, his former wife Elena looked at his modest suit, smiled cruelly, and laughed loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. She pointed at him as if he were a forgotten chapter of her life and proudly told the people around her that some men never changed. She had no idea that the quiet man standing in front of her had spent 8 years rebuilding himself from nothing. She had no idea that the person she was mocking was now the man behind one of the most successful companies in the country. And most importantly, she had no idea why he had come back that night. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that a person's true worth cannot be measured by appearances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, leave a comment, and subscribe to Beyond Inspire. Your support helps us bring more stories that remind us that life can change when we refuse to give up. 8 years earlier, Daniel had left the same woman with nothing but a small suitcase, a worn-out watch, and a heart filled with humiliation. Their marriage had once been full of dreams. Daniel had been a hard-working young man who believed that love meant standing beside someone through difficult seasons. He worked long hours at a small construction company, often returning home exhausted, but he never complained because he believed their future would eventually become brighter. Elena, however, slowly became embarrassed by his modest income. She began comparing him with wealthier men and complaining about the apartment they lived in, the old car they drove, and the simple clothes he wore. What hurt Daniel most was not the money she wanted. It was the way she began treating him as though his lack of wealth made him less worthy of respect. When Elena finally asked for a divorce, Daniel did not fight her. He signed the papers with trembling hands and walked away quietly. He remembered standing outside the courthouse that rainy afternoon, staring at the papers that had officially ended their marriage. He had no idea what would happen next. He only knew that he had lost the woman he once loved and the future he had imagined with her. For several months, Daniel struggled to survive. He slept in a tiny rented room, skipped meals to save money, and worked 2 jobs while teaching himself everything he could about business and technology. There were nights when he sat alone beside his window, wondering whether Elena had been right about him after all. But pain can either destroy a person or become the fuel that changes their life. Daniel chose the second path. He started a small logistics business with money he had carefully saved. In the beginning, the company was nothing more than one old van, a borrowed laptop, and a tiny office above a repair shop. Daniel personally delivered packages, answered customer calls, cleaned the office, and worked until midnight. When the business failed to bring in enough money during its first year, he nearly gave up. But then an elderly shop owner gave him his first major contract. Daniel treated that opportunity as if it were worth millions. He worked harder than ever, kept every promise he made, and slowly earned a reputation for honesty. Years passed. One client became 10, 10 became hundreds. His company expanded into several cities. Investors began approaching him. Daniel became wealthy. But wealth never became the thing that defined him. He remembered what it felt like to have nothing. He remembered the people who had helped him when nobody believed in him. So he quietly created a foundation that provided food, scholarships, and employment training for struggling families. He never wanted recognition. In fact, most people who benefited from his generosity never even knew his name. Meanwhile, Elena's life had also changed. She had remarried briefly, but the relationship ended badly. She had built a social circle where appearances mattered more than character, and she often told people that her first husband had been an unsuccessful man who simply could not keep up with her ambitions. She never knew what Daniel had become because he had never tried to contact her. Then came the reunion. It was organized by their old school, bringing former classmates together after many years. The ballroom was filled with expensive decorations, elegant clothing, champagne glasses, and people proudly discussing their careers. Elena arrived wearing a beautiful dress, surrounded by friends who admired her confidence. She was enjoying the attention when she suddenly saw Daniel walking through the entrance. For a moment, she did not recognize him. Daniel was wearing a simple but perfectly tailored suit. He looked older, calmer, and more confident than the man she remembered. He did not arrive surrounded by assistants or photographers. He simply walked into the room, greeted former classmates warmly, and smiled. Elena finally recognized him and immediately began laughing. She looked at his clothes and assumed he was still struggling. Instead of asking how he was doing, she made a sarcastic comment about how surprising it was that he had managed to attend such an expensive event. Several people laughed awkwardly. Daniel simply smiled and said nothing. Then Elena went further. She reminded everyone that she had once been married to him and joked that she had been lucky enough to escape before he dragged her down with him. Her words were sharp, but Daniel remained calm. He looked at her for a moment, not with anger, but with sadness. One of their former classmates tried to change the subject, but Elena continued. She wanted everyone to believe that she had made the right decision 8 years ago. She even suggested that Daniel probably came to the reunion hoping to impress people with a life he didn't have. Then the room suddenly became quiet. The school's principal walked onto the stage and announced a special guest who had anonymously donated millions of dollars to rebuild the school's science center, scholarship program, and library. Everyone turned toward the entrance as a group of organizers approached Daniel. The principal smiled and introduced him as the founder and CEO of a rapidly growing international company and the anonymous donor responsible for the school's largest educational contribution in its history. Elena's smile disappeared. The same man she had mocked moments earlier was not a failure. He was the person everyone had been waiting to honor. But Daniel did something that shocked everyone even more. He refused to embarrass Elena. When the principal asked him to say a few words, Daniel stepped onto the stage and looked across the room. He could have exposed every cruel thing Elena had said. He could have reminded everyone how she had left him when he was struggling. He could have made her feel the same humiliation she had caused him. Instead, he spoke about the people who had helped him when he was at his lowest. He explained that success had taught him something money never could. A person's value is not determined by their bank account, clothes, car, or social status. He said that sometimes the person standing quietly in the corner may be fighting a battle nobody knows about. He said that kindness costs very little, but it can completely change someone's life. Elena stood silently at the back of the room, unable to look at him. After the ceremony, she finally approached Daniel. For the first time in 8 years, there was no arrogance in her expression. She looked embarrassed and deeply regretful. She apologized for the way she had treated him and admitted that she had judged his worth by his financial situation. Daniel listened without interrupting. He did not pretend that the past had never happened. The pain was real, and the scars were still there. But he had learned that forgiveness did not mean forgetting. It meant refusing to let another person's cruelty control the rest of your life. Daniel told her that he hoped she would learn from what happened, just as he had. Then he walked away without anger. That night, Daniel returned home and stood beside his apartment window. Despite all his success, he still lived simply. On his desk was the old watch he had worn when he left the courthouse 8 years earlier. He picked it up and smiled. The man who had walked away that rainy afternoon had believed his life was over, but it had only been beginning. His greatest victory was not becoming rich. It was becoming the kind of person who could be hurt deeply and still choose kindness. He had lost a marriage, but he had found himself. He had lost someone who judged him by what he owned, but he gained the strength to understand that his worth had never depended on anyone else's approval. Sometimes life takes away the person we thought we needed, because it is preparing us to become the person we were always meant to be. And sometimes the quietest comeback is the most powerful one. If this story touched your heart, please don't just watch and move on. Like the video, share it with someone who may be going through a difficult season, and subscribe to Beyond Inspire so we can continue sharing stories about hope, dignity, kindness, and second chances. Before you leave, comment "I choose kindness" if you believe that true success is not about making others feel small, but about becoming strong enough to lift others up. Because in the end, Daniel didn't win because he became richer than the woman who once mocked him. He won because he became a better man than the pain that once tried to break him.